Space Hulk is a dungeon crawler, squad-based combat tactical FPS horror board game adaptation. And I say that as though that exists as some kind of hyper-specific genre. But it doesn't. It's just Space Hulk. The first thing you'll see if you look up any Space Hulk review, whether it be a contemporary one from the 90s or a modern replaying of it, is everyone talks about the difficulty. But not me. I didn't start with the difficulty. I started by saying it's goddamn weird. We'll save all the talk about the absurd difficulty levels later on, once we have everything in context. Because, honestly, you really should go back and play this old 1993 game. Don't let the difficulty scare you off. Space Hulk started as a 1989 board game by Games Workshop and placed within the Warhammer 40,000 setting. Right off the hop, it was heavily inspired by the Alien movies. What is a Space Hulk after all, if not aliens, but with space marines? Soon, Electronic Arts and Games Workshop agreed to a partnership to create a Space Hulk video game. The second Warhammer 40k video game that was ever officially produced. And to put things fully in context, the 40k setting was still quite new at the time, with the first edition being released only 6 years earlier in 1987. Most of the details that would become Warhammer 40,000 as we now know it were already in place right from the beginning though. But the vibe wasn't necessarily there yet. These details mainly existed to make a sci-fi setting that felt a little bit more like a fantasy setting, rather than to hit those grimdark notes we know and love today. Still, at least one reviewer of the Space Hulk video game seemed to have missed the memo on how the setting was developing. Pump your pecs and prepare for battle. What are you, some kind of girly man? But one thing that was already in place, even back then, was the power armor aesthetic. Damn. They really went and just nailed it first try, didn't they? One day, when we invent this stuff for real, it's all I'm gonna wear. I'm absolutely gonna be that guy picking up groceries in Raven Guard armor. Hey, don't lie, you're the same way, I'm not the cringe one here. Which kinda leaves us all with a bit of a conundrum. Until power armor is commercially available to the public, what are we supposed to wear? Well, until then, today's sponsor, Into the AM, is probably the best choice around. Longtime viewers may or may not have picked up on the fact that I absolutely love graphic tees. But I'm also really picky about them. So when a graphic tee company asked to partner up with the channel, I was fairly skeptical at first. But the second I clicked through to their store page, I was like, oh, this is where the good designs have been hiding. I'm generally pretty stressed at the idea of wearing graphic clothing that belongs to like subcultures I'm not into. Into the AM, on the other hand, just offers stunning designs that work for everybody, no matter your interests. And it's not just the graphic tees either. Their basics are cool as hell. And this is basically my new favorite hoodie. Guys, come in. It's comfy as hell. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't say that the lady who worked at the till asked me where I got my sweater. So, Into the AM, it's a thing. Right now, they're selling bundles of 3 graphic tees for $60, or 3 basic tees for $49.95. And if you use my discount code down below, you get a further 10% off of everything. Don't wait, click that link, come on, get compliments from strangers at the grocery store. So before we dive into the depths of a cavernous Space Hulk, I just want to take a second to catch people up on what exactly a Space Hulk is in the 40k setting. And no, the gigantic Terminator armored Marines are not the Space Hulks. Space travel in the 41st millennium sucks, to put it mildly. You have to jump through the warp to make it work, basically taking a little skip through hell. And being how difficult and dangerous that is to do, the incentive is often to build utterly gigantic fuck-off spacecraft so that you can do it as few times as possible. But what happens when these colossal ships drift off the stable routes and get lost in the warp? And what happens to the wrecks of spacecraft after fleet battles? Or ships that otherwise get left derelict in space? These abandoned wrecks are called Space Hulks. And while many of them are single ships, usually being unknowable remnants of alien cultures or Leviathan artifacts from the dark age of technology, others are behemoth conglomerations of dozens or even hundreds of ships collided and fused with one another in the hard vacuum of space. What lies within is beyond treasure. Ancient knowledge of value beyond compare. Space Marines are an incredibly precious soldier within Warhammer 40k lore, but even they are considered expendable when it comes to what can be found inside of these Space Hulks. Within the lore, the Blood Angels, who are usually the protagonists of Space Hulk, once set forth into a Hulk with the entirety of their 1,000-man chapter. Only 50 Marines made it out, and yet the Blood Angels keep pluming these wrecks, even though one of them nearly wiped them out. So what's inside these Hulks that makes them so dangerous? In theory, they could be filled with a lot of things. Haven for pirates, or Eldar corsairs. A never-ending battlefield for orcs. A hellish mini-plane full of cackling demons. But in most Space Hulk stories, there is mainly one classic creature aboard Space Hulks: Gene Stealers. What's a Gene Stealer, you ask?
To which I say, you're gonna have to speak louder! I can't hear you over the sound of this storm bolter!
Not good enough? Okay, fine. Gene Stealers are a type of alien that kind of has a shaky relationship with the Warhammer canon. Sometimes they're a type of Tyranid, sometimes they're not, and sometimes it seems like they've been soft retconned. It can be kinda hard to keep track of where they are in the lore. I'm going to ignore all the Tyranid connection stuff in this video because it just doesn't feel relevant. Pure strain Gene Stealers infect human hosts with their DNA. These hosts will then reproduce with regular humans, and their children will be born as Gene Stealer hybrids. Over time, these infected people will form vast subversive Gene Stealer cults, crossbreeding the hybrids over and over until pure strain Gene Stealers are born, and begin to overrun the planet or space vessel they inhabit. They like to stow away on ships to carry them to new worlds, which is how so many Space Hulks eventually become infested with them. Crash 100 derelicts together, and the odds are pretty solid that there's a Gene Stealer somewhere in there that will infect any survivors over the decades or centuries, leaving wrecks swarming with alien monsters. Their claws can rend even the strongest armor in seconds, and their exoskeletons are highly resilient to gunfire. Pretty much the only group in the entire Imperium who can go toe-to-toe with them in such close quarters are the elite Space Marines, who've earned the right to wear Terminator armor. And that's it. That's the setting. The 1993 game is one of the only versions of Space Hulk to not star the Blood Angel chapter. So we take command of a force of Dark Angels in search of a lost hero of theirs. Before we go any farther, I'd like to make it clear that I really want to cover all the Space Hulk games on my channel, but they are a mountain of work to get through due to their difficulty. I know people don't like it when I like content, but I honestly kind of just want to know that these videos are well received before I overcommit to a huge series. I won't set a specific like target, but let it be known I'm watching the like bar, and I'm considering every like on this video to be a request for more Space Hulk videos. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the actual game. Okay, well, the first thing I noticed was that the version of the game I found was incredible. Now, the voice acting was something that really struck a chord with the contemporary reviewers, so I knew that this weird chipmunk version I had was clearly some form of a bug, or a version someone had made as a prank, but I really wanted to play it like this, because holy fuck is this funny. But in the end, I knew I wouldn't be able to adequately assess the sound work if I played a bugged version, so I found a different copy that didn't have the chipmunk voices. I also scoured the web, and I couldn't find anyone else who had this problem, but goddamn am I glad it was me. The first real thing to note about Space Hulk is that it's a tactical shooter with dungeon crawler style movement, meaning that this is a game that is entirely about angles. You control a squad of 5 Terminator Marines as they complete various objectives on the many areas of the Space Hulk. Most typically, they'll be armed with storm bolters that can fire in an arc in front of them. As such, the core gameplay is about moving places, while making sure that every possible Gene Stealer entryway is covered by one of your Marines. It's so simple, but with so many exceedingly complex layers. Space Marines are like ogres. Some levels you're not gonna have enough guns compared to what you need in order to cover yourself. You'll be vulnerable when the time comes to move to the next position, so your timing and your tempo really start to matter. These 5 Terminators you control are capable of laying down autonomous Overwatch fire at gene stealers that advance down the hall. But there's actually a lot of RNG involved in this. Not every bullet is gonna kill a gene stealer, and it's not health bar based either. I suspect this is done by a hidden die roll, probably with about the same odds as the tabletop version, where you need to roll 2d6 and land a 6 on either die to puncture the stealer's armor. Sometimes you kill them in one shot. Other times, you pump 20 rounds into these guys and they just keep coming. And they don't stop coming. Why is my script turning into Shrek? Compounding on this RNG is the fact that your guns can jam randomly. And this is often a death sentence if you don't have a lot of distance between you and your target. This element ensures that you can't really trust your Marines to hold a position on their own forever. Your luck is always going to run out eventually, but you can delay that by manually taking command of your Marines, which will improve their aim somewhat as well as the rate of fire. That's right, you're not actually playing as a single character or as the squad leader in this game. You're swapping on the fly between 5 Marines, and it takes a lot of getting used to. And the game doesn't actually give you that much time, because this thing ain't turn-based. It's real time. And even the freeze time is limited and will drain as you use it, meaning you're always under pressure to think quickly. Your attention is like too little butter across too much bread. There just isn't enough of you to keep this up for long. This is made far worse on maps where they give you 2 squads to manage. These mechanics are simple, but they're also extremely unforgiving and stifling. I actually love it because it all ludically matches the mood perfectly. The controls were clunky, even back in 1993, but you're also controlling Marines in gigantic sets of archaic and half-understood armor, so the awkward rigidity kind of feels right. Meanwhile, the pressure and limited options leave you with a constant feeling of claustrophobia and panic that's absolutely perfect for the game. It's honestly no surprise that the reviewers of the 90s were scared shitless of this game. To gamers used to modern graphics, I wouldn't say it's scary in the same way, but it's still a goddamned panic attack. It's scary in the way a thriller is, not in the way a horror movie is. And don't take that as me insulting the graphics, by the way. This game looks gorgeous. And if you were to ask modern pixel artists to design Warhammer 40k sprites, they'd have to work pretty damned hard to outdo the inspired artwork of this game. It looks so good, and because it's so clearly pixelated and stylized, nothing actually feels uncanny or all that dated. I mean, the UI does for sure, but not the Marines, the Gene Stealers, or even the Hulk itself. And speaking of the Space Hulks, interesting tidbit, this is apparently a very early game to use ray tracing. All of the Hulks were designed and presented with this technique. It's not quite the way we use ray tracing in modern games, but it's still neat. The reason they did it this way as opposed to other techniques was apparently kind of a compromise. By having home computers render the game, rather than having it all pre-rendered in studio, the required time for the devs to implement a new map was reportedly knocked down from a 2-week period down to only 12 hours. It made things a bit harder on the home PC, but it also allowed the devs to pack 51 missions onto the disc without kicking dust for months while the stuff rendered. Regardless, the groundbreaking visuals aren't the only part of the presentation that Space Hulk was pushing the envelope in. There's a lot to like in the way Space Hulk sounds. Off the hop, we get a fairly classic Warhammer 40k song, Get Out of My Way by D-Rock, who were a hard rock band from the very strange time period when Games Workshop had their own record label. It's a long story. Anyway, Brian May of Queen actually recorded some of the guitar segments in this song, so that's neat.
Get out of my way. I can do anything. Get out of my way.
And in between recording Warhammer music, they accidentally created a Chainsaw Man theme song like 30 years early. Can't believe the anime snubbed them like that.
Chainsaw Man.
The other music is quite good, but there's not a lot of it, it being mostly exiled to the loading screens and such. Either way, it's got that Warhammer music identity that we all know and love, so it doesn't disappoint there. Inside the Space Hulk maps, we're treated to a really significant soundscape that still holds up. Not a lot of games from this era recorded voice work, but this game did. And it was decent voice work. And they used it well. A trifecta that you don't see very often in this era. The combat shouts are honestly a godsend. Your Marines will call out targets, confirm their kills, point out when gene stealers are fleeing, and also scream when they die. It's so useful, considering how many screens you're supposed to be jumping across. The sound becomes an extension of the UI, and without it, the UI would have been insufficient. They managed to get all that stuff right, so obviously they had to screw up like something in regards to the sound. So naturally they picked whatever this is.
Exit via the teleport area here. Scanners indicate that there are many life forms present.
Who animate? Why would they do it like this? wait, hang on. The gene stealers are also well done. It's got that classic horror thing where you hear the gene stealers long before you see them. But they've also got ambient monster sounds that make it so you're always second guessing yourself and checking the radar screen. It's very freaky, and it adds to the oppressive claustrophobia of the setting. All in all, this game was way better presented than 1993 audiences were used to. Now, I guess it's finally time to talk about the elephant in the room: the difficulty. Space Hulk has a reputation for being ridiculously, impossibly hard. Well, I'm happy to report that the difficulty wasn't anything absurd. It was hard at first, but with a lot of work and practice over 3 full days of hard gaming, I was finally able to overcome the odds and beat the tutorial.
What?
Oh god. I guess I really do need to pump up my pecs and prepare for battle. I was just having difficulty understanding why it was like this. Rather than assume incompetence, I realized I was going to need further context. I needed to play the board game it was based on. Now, the 1989 version is obviously no longer available, but I was able to find some old rulebooks and make a recreation of it on Roll20. For legal reasons, this is not Space Hulk 1989. This is Space Hunks 1969, and it's covered by parody law or something. I gathered up a few friends from my D&D group to give it a little test spin to see how it played, and I'm very glad that I did this because it provided so much context on the stuff I was missing in the video game. The big thing is that you might be fooled into thinking that the game just shares an IP with the tabletop version without adapting the game itself. I mean, how could it be a video game adaptation? It's an FPS. The board game clearly wasn't an FPS. But if you thought that, well, you would be wrong. Because despite all of the FPS stuff, Space Hulk is a very faithful adaptation of the rules from the board game. Most things are one-to-one and work identically. However, right from the start of production, EA and Games Workshop both agreed that they should use computer mechanics in ways that harmonized with the original board game elements, rather than just doing a straight adaptation. Essentially, what they decided was that they were going to follow the spirit of all of the board game mechanics and adapt them into a way that worked better on PC. They weren't going to literally adapt every single thing, but they were always going to adapt the intent of that thing. Here's an example. See, the video game keeps up the pressure by scrapping the turn-based gameplay in favor of doing everything in real time, and ensures that you have to think fast by giving you a limited amount of freeze time to issue orders. The freeze time is actually fairly generous, to be sure, but still, the effect is scary, and it's stressful, and it's also excellent. And this was actually a board game mechanic, but they didn't port it straight. They changed it to work better in the medium. The particular flavor of panic attack that the board game inflicts on the player is to have the Space Marine player, but not the Gene Stealer player, be forced to play on a timer. Their turns can take 2 minutes, plus 30 seconds for every sergeant they have that's alive. And of course, they will lose that time if any of their sergeants die. It is pure anxiety as a mechanic. Oh, it's going slowly.
Oh, that is your time.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
That was 3 minutes.
I was not watching that.
Fuck. Dude, that's short. Oh, no.
Oh,
Okay. Still, though, it's not without its merits. You like the timer, right?
It fit exactly what it needed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the
And it also kept the
elite.
game moving.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I like the concept of a timer. It's going to be what stops the Space Marine player from just prodding along, figuring out perfect
Like,
angles because you gotta go
Yeah,
quick.
you can spend forever doing the Space Marine turn, and like
Yeah.
you said, they have some advantages, especially if they're defenders. So like you can't let that player go for optimal play.
Yeah.
It would also take 3 hours. Like we played
That's
an
true.
hour in this scenario, actually close to an hour and a half.
Yeah.
But then again, 30 kills. I did not think that would be possible.
The board game is relatively balanced between the two players. The one who's defending territory usually has the advantage. Terminators evaporate the Xenos in long hallways, but Gene Stealers excel at ambushes around corners, or huge mass assaults where they can rely on bolt weapons jamming. The video game is single player though, which means that the game is free to experiment a bit more with the balance. The number of Stealers that you're going to face is a lot more in the video game, and the maps are often more skewed in their favor. But on the other hand, you also have more tools to deal with it. And the FPS controls are only one part of that. Some of the weapons have been altered, and new ones have been added. The board game gives you 3 regular armed Marines, 1 sergeant who is slightly less bad at melee, and 1 Marine with a heavy flamer. And this heavy flamer completely dunks on the Gene Stealers, albeit the ammo is limited as the balance factor. The video game nerfs this weapon a bit by removing its range, but often gives you more of them as compensation. The new stuff that gets added is mainly melee weapons, and the manual is kind of vague about the differences between them. So I'm gonna speak about them as if they're all the same. These weapons give you a much needed edge in the tight corridors where bolt guns don't have the range needed to keep your team alive. To see how this vast crescendo of game elements come together, let's talk about the 21 mission long campaign. The campaign begins on a planet called Michaelia, where the Dark Angels once thwarted a Gene Stealer infestation led from the Space Hulk, the Sin of Damnation. In the end, Captain Lithonius boarded the Hulk, but then the vessel disappeared into the warp. Now once again, the Gene Stealers have appeared on the planet, and it's up to the Dark Angels to aid Inquisitor Sabathius in squashing the Hulk. Level design is generally quite creative. You even get missions where you control only Sabathius as he investigates, and it's a harrowing game mode. As the missions roll by, with great difficulty, the Sin of Damnation appears once again in orbit, with Captain Lithonius' communicator calling for help. Unfortunately, history does not repeat itself, and this time the Gene Stealer infestation is too far along. The Marines evacuate and declare exterminatus upon the world. Billions are killed by the virus bombs to contain the threat. Stinging with defeat, the chapter boards the mysterious Hulk. What does it look like to board a Space Hulk, you ask? It looks like this. We enter the Hulk and begin clearing it of key targets and brood nests. The game stops giving you exact equipment loadouts and allows you to start choosing your own gear on most levels from now on. The difficulty from here begins to get pretty obscene, and my progress really slowed to a crawl. That's why this video has taken me so long to make. I spent weeks slowly progressing my way through this damned campaign. Now, up until now, I have praised all the design choices, and I quite liked how the RNG element of combat was reinforcing the horror and the tone of the game. But man, did it stop feeling good as we progressed. Especially on missions that would require mostly melee combat, it can feel real bad. Sometimes a Terminator with lightning claws can hack apart 30 Stealers in a row, no problem. Other time, the first Gene Stealer to spawn just carves their way through 3 melee Terminators in a row. You'll do everything absolutely perfectly on these maps, but you're still held back because apparently this time you got a batch of Marines who didn't get their competence implants. It actually really sucks. On individual maps, I think this is all more than okay. But trying to complete a campaign where victory is essentially just you trying repeatedly until the dice rolls are good, man, I hate that. Individual missions would often take me 6 to 8 hours of trying until the odds were finally in my favor. Look, I will roughly lay out the math here. I don't have exact numbers, but it feels like your melee Terminators win around 9 out of 10 fights they get into. On longer levels, your melee fighters will need to win around 40 or more of these battles. And remember, if you lose any of them, it's instant death. Your melee guy's gone. Most of the time, you'll have like one redundant Marine, so you can afford to lose one engagement, but the odds are still really stacked against you. Your chance of beating 40 Gene Stealers without taking a loss are like a fraction of a percent. I'm not a math guy, but I think we double our chance of success if we have a redundant Marine. Either way, the odds are still terrible. Your chances are a little higher than that, though, if you're playing effectively. You have to put your melee guys in the right spots and then race to complete the objective as quick as possible before your inevitable downfall. And on maps where the objective is long, whew, you need damned good RNG to have enough time. Your squad will be wiped out. The question is just about if the dice rolls will give you enough time to complete the map objectives before you wipe. A lot has been written about the fact that Dark Souls as a series is tough but fair. Space Hulk is tough and unfair. This might not be so bad if you're playing for fun, but if you're, say, trying to review the game for your YouTube channel, and you keep having to delay the video because your stupid Space Marines forgot how to Space Marine 30 times in a row, it gets a little frustrating. I am not here to whine, but doing this for weeks really took a toll on my mental health. I was starting to get irritated at all times, and when I started lashing out at family members, I knew I needed to change something. But no, I didn't quit. I had no control over how long these missions were going to take, or when the numbers were finally going to work out in my favor. But then I remembered that there's like a whole school of philosophy around being trapped in situations you can't control, and in theory I tried and practice it. So the only way I could keep going was to take control of the rest of my life. You know, eating better, sleeping better, smashing my jogging goals, and kind of just trying to be very kind and considerate to my family and everyone around me. Let's do it. Me and this dog, we're gonna go for a walk. So Valentine's Day is actually my mom's birthday party, and I'm just on my way to the grocery store, gonna pick up some of her favorite chocolates. But she really loves cards, and I'm always so lazy, I never get them. Today I'm gonna go get a card. It is time to sleep for a full 8 hours. Any less and everything will be ruined. I actually kind of had to become a better person to continue this game, and it worked. I started feeling better immediately, and the frustration I was feeling at the game soon passed. I was able to start progressing much faster, since I was able to play for longer without punching holes in my walls. I've got a monthly podcast I release on my Patreon, so I mean, if you're interested in the full story, I'll talk about everything that happened in the March episode, so sign up there. Also, I mean, support the channel, get added to the credit roll, and blah 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 perks and stuff. Unfortunately, I still couldn't make it to the end. And it wasn't because the difficulty beat me, no. My stubborn ass was gonna stick through to the end. Unfortunately though, I wasn't left with much of a choice. I hit a game-breaking bug that I couldn't get past. There's a mission where you're supposed to plant and then detonate 10 explosive charges in the Hulk. I planted them all, no problem. And then the little pieces of shit wouldn't explode. And I tried everything. I smashed every key on my keyboard. I looked around the internet and see, here's another YouTuber completing the mission. I did exactly what he did, and nothing happened. Nothing on heaven nor earth could get these fucking things to detonate. There was nothing publicly available online about it. I found a single comment from someone who had the same problem, but I found no solutions. Eventually, I thought I'd found the solution. You're supposed to exit the level after you detonate the mines, so I thought maybe it would just happen after I did that. So I made my 6th attempt at this map, and my Terminators hauled ass to the exit, where we failed the mission because we teleported out without detonating the mines. Maybe there is a way to do it. Maybe it's not a bug, maybe I might have missed something, but I couldn't find a solution. So I could go no further in Space Hulk. But do you know the cosmic irony of this being the bugged level? This mission, I shit you not, was called Tech Support. So that's Space Hulk. It hurt me. But it forced me to be the best version of myself. And so, despite the pain, I really like it actually. And even weirder, all that RNG that was just absolutely killing me, I can't conceive of any other possible way for the game to do the combat without, like, wrecking the tone. I like the RNG. So I was forced to think on that contradiction over just how much I suffered through the game, and, you know, the fact that all the mechanics felt right, and eventually I think I got it. Space Hulk is incredibly well designed, and I love how difficult it is, and how random it is. It really feels like you're never safe and you can die at any time, and you're just trying to beat the odds and complete the level. That's great. It's an incredible adaptation of a board game. But that's the problem. It's still a board game at heart. And the thing with board games is that you play them a couple times every now and then. You don't play 51 consecutive maps worth of Space Hulk in a row until you've won them all. That's stupid! The Space Hulk video game is great. But my one and only criticism isn't the difficulty. It's that the campaign just kind of overstays its welcome. I honestly think the campaign would have been much better if it was only 10 missions long. Make those missions harder, I don't care, that would have been fine. Despite that, I still recommend you give it a go if you can get a hold of it. Just don't force yourself to marathon it, and maybe don't play the campaign. There's a lot of fun to be had here, but there is a wrong way to play it, and I think the campaign encourages that wrong way to play it. So play the game in moderation, and know when to stop. As I said, I'm watching the likes to see if you guys want me to review the sequel, but I'm not gonna touch it right away because I need to be happy for a while. Okay, see you soon, everybody.